Today marks 1 year since you had your heart surgery. Here is your story. Sometimes when I look back at pictures, I cannot believe all the things you went through. You were hardly over 24 hours old and you were placed on the ventilator. When I got that call at 5:30 a.m., I raced to the hospital and cried by your bedside because seeing you intubated for the first time was extremely hard. You had multiple chest x-rays, blood work multiple times a day as well. Then you developed jaundice and were also placed under lights. You then were taken off the ventilator and placed on the CPAP machine for extra oxygen. You started to come out of your sedation and things were looking up. Even got off the CPAP machine for a while. I got to hold you for the first time in days. On July 17th, I left the hospital around 6:30. I remember walking all the way out to my truck and then remembered I forgot to put on your hat. So I walked all the way back up to you, put it on, snapped a picture, and left for the night. Little did I know that would be the last picture I took of you awake and looking at me for a long time. Around 8 p.m., I received a call that you were placed back on CPAP because you weren't doing well, which wasn't surprising to me because you always did worse when I left. It was around 10 p.m., and I received another call that you were going to be flown to Winnipeg that night. I was terrified. I was so upset that things weren't going how I planned. I was emotional. I was sore. I had to get there ASAP and could only bring a small bag on the plane. I started racing around trying to think clearly about what I needed to bring and started shoving as much as I could in my small backpack. My pump was taking up half of it. I lived in those 4 outfits for 2 months. I raced to the hospital. I had been up since 6 a.m. By the time I got to the hospital, it was almost midnight. The plane was supposed to be coming around 3 a.m. I didn't know what was about to happen, but I knew that I needed to hold you until they pried you away from me. And so, I did just that. I took off my shirt and sat there skin to skin with you. I was cold, I was uncomfortable, I was exhausted, but I sat there with you for 3 hours and didn't move a muscle, so that I wouldn't disturb your oxygen lines. Your breathing slowed, your oxygen levels went up, and you were a lot better when I held you. They showed up to pick you up. You were not happy at all, and cried until the stretcher started moving down the halls. We made it down to the ambulance, and I rocked your stretcher so you would stay asleep until we got on. I hadn't been on a plane in quite a while, especially a small little one, so I was a bit nervous. No one really wants to take their newborn up into the sky. You were so mad that they had to sedate you for the flight. It was quite a flight. Adrenaline was keeping me awake. I enjoyed the peace for a bit, knowing that it was chaos that awaited me at the new hospital, and was wondering what it was going to be like there. We landed and got into an ambulance, and had to take a 35-minute drive to the hospital. It was about 7:30 a.m. by this point. I've been up for over 24 hours now, and was definitely feeling it. We arrived to the NICU at the Health Science Center. There was a crowd of doctors and nurses waiting for you, all of them with 1,000 questions, and they looked to me for the answer. At this point, I realized I had lost my health card in this process, so that did not help at all. I was being asked 100 questions about everything, and I answered as best as my tired brain could. And then, everybody was gone, and it was just us again. I took the time to pump, which I was doing faithfully every 2 to 3 hours, in hopes that I would be able to nurse you eventually. Adrenaline was still pumping through me, but I managed to sleep for about 45 minutes. Then Papa was there to come to us. I had to decide who was going to be on the list. No thanks to COVID, only one person was allowed up, and I could not change it. I decided that it was going to be Papa Zaretsky because your dad needed to be with your brothers. Papa met you for the first time that day around 1 p.m., I believe. You were laying in your bed on your tummy. Your eyes weren't open because you were so puffy you couldn't open them. You were pale and didn't move much, but you did grip his finger. I went to a hotel with Papa and Grandma Trish where your Uncle Austin came too, and we ordered takeout and visited. It wasn't until about 9 p.m. that I passed out, 40 hours awake, and trying to recover still from having you only a week ago. I know I snored loud in between pumping in the night, and I don't think anyone slept overly good. The next day, Papa left, and I went back to the hospital. Every morning at 9 a.m., there were rounds, which was a team of doctors going over your case, deciding what the best course of action was for you for the day. They were all saying that they thought it was just your vocal cords and that they would get ENT to come look at you, but there was talk about sending you back to Brandon. They also wanted equipment tested because your stats weren't being picked up on your feet too well, and they wanted to make sure that it wasn't you. But I knew it was because this had been an ongoing issue since you first went into the NICU. The day went on and it was determined that it was you and it was not the equipment. Your nurse told me that in her 25 years she had seen this a couple of times and it was always heart-related. I started to realize that this might just be more than your throat. Afternoon rounds came, and the head doctor said he needed to be seen by cardio first thing in the morning. As the night went on, I was supposed to go stay in a hotel, but I just couldn't pry myself away. I knew that something wasn't right. So I sort of slept on the chair bed thing, which was the most uncomfortable hospital bed I encountered out of them all. You were weighed, and it said you had gained 500 grams since your last weigh. The nurse weighed you 5 times on different scales because that just seemed impossible. Then they called the doctor at about 3 a.m. He ordered you to be put on Lasix, which makes you pee out excess fluids. July 19th. This was a rough one. Papa came to stay with us, so Grandma Trish dropped him off, and this was the start of a long journey for the 3 of us. We went up into your room, and your IV had blown. I remember saying to Papa, "You ready? It's about to get rough." At first, I was worried about Papa, and if he'd be okay seeing you being poked and crying, but I think he got used to it pretty quickly. You were a hard poke, and doing IVs on you was always hard, took a long time, with a few different nurses too. After the day went on, cardio still hadn't been there, and I was starting to get a little mad. Afternoon rounds came, and the head doctor demanded he be seen ASAP, as the workday was almost over. Shortly after, an ultrasound guy came in. This was the first time I was ever to see your heart. I remember studying the screen, trying my best to remember heart anatomy, and from what I could see it looked okay, but I was also studying the ultrasound tech. He was being nice, overly nice, like nervous nice, and was talking and talking. Then he went quiet for a few minutes, and Papa looked at me and was kind of like, "Good?" And I was like, I don't know, I don't think so. Then he left, and he said he would go show the cardiologist the pictures, and if he needed any more, he would come back. We knew it would probably be a bit of a wait, as per usual, so we decided to go and get some fresh air. We didn't spend long outside as we didn't want to miss the cardiologist. We got up to the sign-in desk, and I seen a group of doctors running into the NICU, one of them being the guy who just took your ultrasound. And I said, "Oh my God, it's Owen." And Papa said, "Oh, I'm sure it's not." And I just started speed walking into the NICU, as we had to go through a different entrance. We walked in, and there was a crowd of doctors and nurses inside and outside of your room. I pushed through them to see a man doing your ultrasound very seriously. We were silent, and I stood there to try to keep you happy and calm for him. He then explained to us what was going on, and that this was a critical situation and he needed surgery immediately. I remember saying, "Okay, I get it. Is it fixable? You can fix him, right?" And he was like, "Yes, but he has to go to Edmonton." I had a short cry in Papa's arms, and then all chaos broke out. You were instantly sedated and put on the ventilator again. They tried to give you drugs to open up a valve in your heart, but it wasn't working. I remember there was a moment you turned blue, and I almost punched a nurse who didn't notice right away. You had multiple IVs put in, central lines in your legs, belly button. You looked terrible. It was terrible. Then a lady came in trying to get us to choose flights and was giving us so much information about where we were going, the hospital you would be in, COVID regulations, and flying. Our heads were spinning. I signed a bunch of paperwork and then decided to fly with Papa in the morning and not to go with you on the plane, which wasn't an easy decision because every muscle in my body didn't want to leave your side. And then it was time to call your dad. No one knew anything at that point except for the three of us. Hard phone calls were made, and then you were taken away on a stretcher, and Papa and I just stood there in shock, trying to process everything that just happened. Papa and I flew out of Winnipeg, I think around 5:30 a.m. the next morning. When we arrived at the hotel, we threw our bags down, pulled out our maps, and went straight to the hospital, which was thankfully only a short walk away. We walked in wide-eyed, not knowing where we were going, but we found you finally. You were laying there asleep, but you had lost a bunch of your puffiness, and I could see your eyelids and the shape of your actual face for the very first time. Because little did I know that your face was actually puffy since about the first day after birth, and I had never really seen your actual face shape. Then a doctor came in and told us that your surgery was in 2 hours. We sure were glad we made it there when we did. My mind was swirling. Would you make it through the surgery? How long are we going to be here? How are my other boys? Am I going to be okay? Is my dad okay? Then your surgeon came in and drew us a picture of what your aorta looked like and how he was going to fix it. Explained he was going in through your back and not your front. And then it was time to go. We stopped outside the doors to the OR and it was time to say goodbye. I leaned over and gave you a kiss on your forehead and squeezed your hand, thinking to myself, you better make it through this. This better not be the last time I see you. And then you were gone. I cried in Papa's arms for about 30 seconds and then stopped myself because I knew I wouldn't stop if I let myself cry any more. Then we waited for 4.5 hours, the longest 4.5 hours of my life. And then finally it was time. You were coming back up. And I just asked the nurse, he's okay? He's alive? And they said, yes, you had made it through. I don't think people realize how close to not making it you really were. The surgeon explained that it was a success, and that it is better, not as good as he had hoped, but you would be better. You came rolling into the room. You had more things coming out of you than before. Chest tube, blood, bandages. Didn't even look like you. Papa and I were falling asleep as we stood by your bed. Yes, that can apparently happen. Papa and I went back to the hotel later that evening. We were so tired we had a huge laughing fit together. About what? Who knows? Probably relief that you had made it, we made it, and now we were on the road to recovery. The recovery process was hard. Your throat was damaged by an intubation, and it made you have to stay on the ventilator a lot longer and have a few scopes in the OR. Your left lung collapsed at one point. You had x-rays basically every day, blood work every day. Your heel had no spot on it that wasn't pricked. It was an endless cycle of rounds, going up on things, then down, then up, off the ventilator, then on again, pumping, holding you as much as I was able, suctioning your mouth for you, watching your monitor non-stop, staring at ultrasounds, having to make sure my voice was heard if I thought you needed something, having to watch you cry with no sound coming out and not being able to help. It was the hardest time of our lives. You went through so much and it broke us every time we had to see you go through anything. On August 9th, it was time for Papa to go home and for your dad and brothers to come to us. Saying goodbye to Papa was one of the hardest days of my life. He was there for us through the darkest time of our lives. He held our hands. He told us that it was going to be okay. He fought for you and made sure that I was okay. By this time you were doing better, though. You were on oxygen and were slowly coming off drugs and getting more food. There was talk about you going to the pediatric floor and getting out of the NICU, which was huge. Papa left for the airport early that morning. That morning, when I went to the hospital, you were taken off CPAP, and you were wearing a onesie for the first time. It was so amazing to see you looking semi-normal again. Around 2 p.m., your dad and brothers were arriving to the hotel after almost 2 days of driving. I stood in the parking lot waiting, so excited. I had never been away from them for more than a night before, so after a month I missed them so much that honestly it hurt. We pulled into the parking lot and I instantly started uncontrollably sobbing as soon as I seen them. Adrian had had a growth spurt during that month and looked different to me. He took it the hardest, as we had never really been apart before. Your dad got to see you for the first time that afternoon since July 16th. Over the next couple of weeks, we were moved to the pediatric floor where I spent every night with you. I would go back and forth from the hospital and hotel all day, trying to give everybody attention, nursing you, cooking for your brothers. I would wait until your brothers were asleep, and then I would go to the hospital for the night and repeat. I'm not too entirely sure how I stayed awake for that month. Our first night together on the pediatric floor is one I'll never forget. We were finally nursing. It was just you and me in a room alone. I could take you off the monitors occasionally. I was dressing you, changing you. There was no nurses hovering around us. And for the first time, you felt like my baby. Finally, it was time to get out of the hospital. Leaving that hospital with you was one of the most amazing feelings I have ever experienced. We were free. We had to stay in a hotel, though, for a week and come back for a checkup. Oh my goodness, was it fun having all three of you in a hotel room together. A week later, we went for a checkup, and you were having some issues gaining weight, and there was talk about you having another surgery because of your high blood pressure. Ugh, we sure were upset about that, but we kept plucking along, trying to enjoy our time together as a family. Finally, we got the call that you were good to go home, and that they wanted to wait just a bit longer to see how you did. The next day, we got up and started packing. We sure accumulated a lot of stuff over the 2 months. It took us quite a long time to pack and get on the road. 2 days later, we pulled up into our driveway. Wow. I left 2 months ago to hop on a plane with you, and here we are pulling up into our driveway like nothing ever happened. We walked in. Now it was time to actually start our lives together as a family, in our home. I put you in your swing for the very first time. All of your newborn things were sitting out the way I had left them, and that we never got to use. But we were home, and we were happy, and you could finally meet your family. And now here we are. I'm writing this a year later, and I still remember it like it was last week. I'm sure glad you won't remember it. Since then, you have been through a catheter procedure, dodged an open heart surgery, and for right now you are doing amazing. We all just hope that you continue to keep on staying amazing. We have been through so much, you, me, Papa. We'll have a special bond forever from it all. Your dad and I know that we can get through anything together, and we learned so much from this experience. I will always be by your bedside no matter what the future has in store for you. You are the strongest human I have ever seen. We will be forever thankful to all of the family and friends that helped us through this journey. It was a hard experience, one I wish on no one, but I like to think it made us stronger. Looking at you now, no one would know the things you have been through. You're one tough nut, and have such a strong determination that I hope sticks with you forever. Love you, buddy. Love, Mom.